स्टडी IQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।
Welcome to StudyIQ's initiative, the podcast. I am your host, Dipansh Moorjani. So tighten your belts because it is time for the podcast of the day. In our previous episodes, we have been discussing features of our constitution like fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy, and fundamental duties. Our new listeners can stream to our episodes not only on YouTube but on various audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Kuku FM, Google Podcast, Hubhopper, Apple Podcast, etc. The topic of discussion for today's episode will be constitutional amendment. We all know that the provisions which are being mentioned in our constitution can be amended. Sir, constitutional amendment is one of the most important topics when it comes to UPSC preparation. So can you give us some useful information which can help students to understand this topic?
To define constitutional amendment process, Article 368 of Indian Constitution under Part 20 provides that there are two types of amendments. Number 1, by a special majority of Parliament, and number 2, by a special majority of Parliament with a ratification by half of the total states. But some other articles provide for the amendment of certain provisions of the Constitution by simple majority of Parliament also. That is, a majority of the members of each house present and voting. Notably, these amendments are not deemed to be amendments of Constitution for the purpose of Article 368.
Sir, just now you had mentioned about simple majority, but we are curious to know different types of majority of amendment.
There are different types of amendments in Indian Constitution. The list of types of amendments can be found like number 1, amendment by simple majority of Parliament, number 2, amendment by special majority of Parliament, and number 3, amendment by special majority of Parliament and the ratification of at least half of the state legislatures.
Sir, can you throw some light on those constitutional provisions which can be amended through simple majority?
A number of provisions in the Constitution can be amended by a simple majority of the two houses of Parliament outside the scope of Article 368. I will list out the following provisions which will be amended by simple majority of Parliament. Number 1, admission or establishment of new states. Number 2, formation of new states and alteration of areas, boundaries or names of existing states. When you have to abolish or create a legislative council in states, Parliament use simple majority. Then the deciding of allowances, privileges and so on of the President, Governor and Speaker and judges, those will be decided by simple majority by Parliament. Even quorum in Parliament is also decided by simple majority by Parliament. What does it mean? Like, quorum means what should be the attendance, what should be the decorum of Parliament. The salaries, allowances of member of Parliament, rules of procedure of a Parliament, privileges of parliamentarians, members and committees are also decided by simple majority. Use of English language in Parliament, number of judges in Supreme Court, matters related to your citizenship's acquisition or anybody's citizenship getting terminated will be decided by simple majority. Election to the Parliament and state legislature, in this context, delimitation of constituencies in those elections, these all decided by simple majority by Parliament. Any matters related to union territories or scheduled tribes and their administered areas under Schedule 5 and 6 will be decided by simple majority by Parliament.
Sir, the next type of majority is a special majority of the Parliament. Students often get confused while understanding this type of majority. So can you please enlighten us on special majority of Parliament?
The majority of the provisions in the Constitution need to be amended by special majority of Parliament. That is, majority of the total membership of each house and a majority of 2/3 of members of each house present and voting. The expression total membership means the total number of members comprising the house irrespective of the fact whether there are some vacancies or absentees in the House. The special majority is required only for voting at the third reading stage of the bill. However, by the way of abundant caution, the requirements for the special majority has been provided for in the rules of the houses in respect to all effective stages of the bill. The provisions which can be amended by this way includes number 1, if you want to amend fundamental rights, number 2, if you want to alter or amend DPSPs, and number 3, all other provisions which are not covered by the simple majority and the majority which is also including 50% of the state.
Sir, how can we understand a special majority of parliament and consent of the states?
Those provisions of constitution which are related to the federal structures of polity can be amended by a special majority of the parliament and also needs consent of half of the state legislature by simple majority. If one or some or all remaining states take no action on the bill, it does not matter. The moment half of the states give their consent, the formality is completed. There is no time limit within which the states should give their consent to the bill. The following provisions can be amended by this way. To understand following provisions which I am going to tell you, just think about whether all these provisions are altering the federal thread of our polity. The first provision which will be altered or amended by the special majority and consent of the states is election of the president and its manner. Second is extent of the executive power of union and states. Third is Supreme Court and High Court's changes. If you want to change Supreme Court and High Court's power, some structures into it. Distribution of legislative powers between union and states. Any of the list in the 7th schedule, which is comprised of union list, concurrent list and state list. If any changes have to be done in all 3 lists or any of the list in the 3, can be done only when the special majority plus 50% of the state's consent. Even power of parliament to amend the constitution and its procedure under Article 368 itself needs the special majority plus 50% of the consent of state.
Sir, after understanding different types of majority, now we are curious to understand the procedure which is mentioned under Article 368 of the Constitution to amend any provision of our Constitution.
So I will tell you the whole process of any bill which is generated for an constitutional amendment and how it is being enacted as a constitutional act in the end. So I will make you walk through all the stages of the bill. An amendment of the constitution can be initiated only by the introduction of a bill for the purpose in either house of the parliament. So this bill can be introduced in both the houses, either in Lok Sabha or in Rajya Sabha. However, this constitutional amendment bill cannot be introduced or initiated in state legislature. Number 2, the bill can be introduced either by minister or by a private member and does not require any prior permission of the president. However, each house must pass the bill separately. In case of disagreement between the 2 houses, there is no provision for holding a joint sitting of the 2 houses for the purpose of deliberation or the passage of bill. If the bill seeks to amend the federal provision of constitution, it must also be ratified by the legislatures of half of the states by simple majority. After duly passed by both the houses of parliament and ratified by the state legislature, where necessary, the bill is presented to the president for assent. Then the president must give his assent to the bill. He can neither withhold his assent to the bill nor return the bill for reconsideration to the parliament. After president's assent, the bill finally becomes act and a constitution stands amended in accordance with the terms of the act.
Sir, when it comes to constitutional amendment, then any provision which is mentioned in our constitution can be amended, or there are some limitations on parliament?
The present position of the parliament under Article 368 can amend any part of Constitution, even including fundamental rights. However, there is a condition to it, which says that the basic structure of Constitution should not get affected. In Keshwananda Bharti case, Supreme Court have highlighted the doctrine of basic structure, and it should not affect the Constitutional Amendment Act affecting the basic structure of Constitution. And Supreme Court have not defined what are the basic structure in rigidity. However, the doctrine of basic structure according to Supreme Court is in evolving nature. That's why this is the only limitation for amending the Constitution, where a basic structure of Constitution should not get affected.
Sir, thank you for giving us the information. Dear listeners, we will call it quits for this episode of the podcast. In the next episode, we will be back with another topic. Till then, keep studying and stay connected with StudyIQ. You can listen to StudyIQ Presents the podcast on various audio streaming platforms such as Hubhopper, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Kuku FM, Spotify, etc. Links are being pinned in the comment section below. Thank you.